Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS live stream for this week's Pebble Beach Pro-Am. We've got an elevated field, beautiful golf course that might be a little bit dreary this weekend with rain, with a little bit of high winds expected on Sunday, but should set the setting for a perfect backdrop at this event and one that's going to be closely contested, I have to imagine. So going to cover what you need to know both for DFS, betting, prop side of things towards the end of it here in the stream, and any questions that you may have as well. So if you've got any of those questions, throw them down in chat. I see a few people have already said hi. What's going on, James? What's going on, Mr. Waking Up? And Mr. Waking Up says, this feels like a major. It's the first real event of this season. The Tournament of Champions is a little bit of a hidden giggle, especially with that kind of golf course. But now that we've got some weather, we've got a full field, no cut this week. So maybe that aspect lacking, but a hell of a field out there. So I agree with you. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We've got, give me all the Canadians except Connors. You've got Mac Hughes, Svensson, and Nick Taylor. I'm with you on Svensson and Nick Taylor. And Nick Taylor, right, gone out there, won this event in the past. Gotta love that course history. So we'll dive on into it. This slate is going to be an absolute handful. It's a little bit of a headache if you're going out there and trying to handicap it, because the weather, if you haven't heard, and you've probably already heard like 5 times at this point, is going to be absolutely dreadful. They're currently getting a massive amount of rain in Pebble Beach. What is going to be probably about an inch of rain out there at the golf course. And then into the morning, there's going to be a few sprinkles around 6, 7 a.m. and pretty windy conditions for Thursday, which as of this morning, right over here on the East Coast, they were calling for it to be pretty calm all day. But now this little bit of weather that was starting over here on Wednesday looks like it's going to linger a little bit into Thursday. So you're starting with slightly higher wind gusts and sustained winds than what we were looking at earlier today. And then if we look at Friday, so if we go hop over to this NAM model, the HRRR isn't updated for Friday quite yet. You'll see that there's rain in the forecast once again, about a half an inch over there between 9 and 11 a.m. And then the wind gusts are kind of down on Friday. But if you look at Saturday, there's a lot of rain coming through. And then on Sunday, if you do like the ultimate look ahead, you have some of the worst conditions that we've ever seen. And it's kind of reminiscent of last year where we had quite a bit of rain. It wasn't perfect the first 3 days. And then all of a sudden on Sunday, you had like 30, 40 mile an hour wind gusts. People were calling for like a 2-3 over par scoring average. They halted play when it got really windy out there, took everyone off the golf course, and they finished play when it was absolutely perfect. So pretty much no matter what you expected last year, got completely through to the wayside. So even if you were going out there being really diligent about the weather, accounted for the fact that there might be, 1, maybe 2 delays, you couldn't have possibly imagined there was going to be a Monday finish. So we're getting a similar type of feel here where there could be delays. Anytime you have rain, it's sustained rain for like 3-4 straight days. There could be accumulation and some sort of delay out there, whether it's a postponement of play, right? Taking, 3-4 hours and getting the golf course back to shape. It wouldn't surprise me to see that happen at some point. So I think the tour's glad that they're taking it back to just a day 1 and 2 Pro-Am because there's no way they could have done that over a 4-day span. You've got the 2 golf courses, right? That'll help out with that with the first 2 days. So I think the tour has to hope and pray out there that they don't have to suspend play out there for Thursday and Friday. And given that it doesn't look like a ton of rain during play, at least on the few models that we're looking at here, they'll probably get away with that. But it's going to be a mutter out there. You're going to have wet clubs. You can see there's sporadic pockets of rain coming through and a lot of the different forecasts, which is just going to annoy the players, right? You may have lift clean in place. That might be an advantage to some of the more accurate drivers. But in general, there could be multiple delays out here. Saturday, Sunday especially. I don't think they're going to play Sunday. If we had to, put our flag in the ground right now and decide like, okay, what's going to happen on Sunday? I mean, I would say they're probably not going to play, right? I mean, 40, 50 mile an hour winds doesn't really seem like something that they could get this golf course playable in. Everything is far too exposed over there on Pebble Beach. And unless they're growing out the greens for like 2-3 straight days without cutting them, they're going to be moving out there on those surfaces. They're sloped out there at Pebble Beach. That's part of the defense of the golf course is having those tricky greens. And the byproduct of that is that you can't play them in like 40, 50 mile an hour winds. So we'll have to see how that plays out, whether they even tee it up out there on Sunday. So there could be a Monday finish. Days 1 and 2, I wouldn't completely rule out the possibility of there being some sort of a delay in play. Whether it's a delay to start play, right, with some of the accumulation overnight. You can see they're getting a ton of rain right now and are supposed to get some in the morning. So there's a chance, right? They need an hour or two to get the golf course ready. If you have a delay, then you have the prom out there, right? So it's going to be like 6.5 hour rounds. And then we have another potential delay on Friday, right, with all this overnight rain and some coming through in the morning hours, right as, play is supposed to start right there. If that were to happen, I mean, it could go into Saturday, right? You could have a Saturday cut line situation where all of our, pre-planning gets completely thrown into the fryer. So this is the kind of week where I'm going to be playing both sides. So I'm going to be stacking both golf courses in terms of the rotations. So the guys starting on Spyglass and then that are going to Pebble for round number 2, I'm going to have lineups that are stacking that side. And then, of course, for the other wave where you have Pebble going to Spyglass, I'm going to have lineups stacking that too. And on top of that, I think this golf course could play a wide variety of different ways. I think we could see the Bombers have a little bit more success this year because of the added length of the golf course. Right now that it's going to be super wet, it's at sea level. You have that dense marine layer. It's only going to be like 50 degrees the first few days, which is just going to further add to the length out there. So I know it's only a 7,000-yard golf course, but I think you're going to see more drivers this time around. And there are scenarios where driving accuracy could be what you want because of the lift clean in place. That is very likely. Or where bombers, right? The opposite end of that spectrum, the guys that have that length to take advantage could also be the types of players that you have to have. You have guys that can throw darts that I'm going to be looking at for some correlated stacks. So it's going to be a little bit more involved with our process this week, especially from like the weather angle. I'm looking at this golf tournament than it otherwise would be, which is going to be a headache. That's why I came in here saying it's going to be a little bit of a handful out here with the slate. But it's one that I have a game plan for, right? I've been thinking about it for the last few days. DFS preview actually came out a little bit later compared to usual because I was trying to mull over the different ways that this golf course could play. And I've come to a few conclusions. It's nothing, for certain out there. But like I said, I'm going to be trying to lean into different type of skill sets. Course history is another one. We'll talk through all of them a little bit later. But I have a much larger player pool than what I'm used to having on this golf slate. And the idea is that all of my different exposures to players are going to be correlated, right? So if I'm going to be taking somebody like, for example, Victor Hovland, I'm going to take him with other guys that have good course history, right? Kind of hoping that that experience, that familiarity around Pebble Beach is what you need in those tough conditions out there, right? I mean, it's not atypical to see Pebble play with a little bit of rain, some wind out there, a little bit cool this time of year. So maybe the guys that have done it before, right, have 4 or 5 starts, right, maybe even have a win at this golf course before, are the ones that are finding themselves towards the top. So there are a million different ways it could go. I'm not going to pretend to be, Nostradamus out here and tell you how it's going to go. I don't know. It's crazy. Pebble Beach has a way of doing that to us, right? Last year, a lot of people that tried to get the weather edge had it completely flipped on their head. And it's not their fault. The people that had that happen to them, right? You don't expect there to be a delay, especially with a 3-course setup, right? It's impossible to account for Saturday, right? When it was the 3-course setup last year. No cut, right? There's a 2-course setup, so it's not nearly as much of a headache this time, but the weather is just as gnarly. So we're going to cut it there with the weather talk. I do want to say one thing. If one day is going to be windier than the other, and this is the way it's looking for day one, right? It's looking like it might actually be pretty windy out there for Thursday, at least compared to Friday where it looks extremely calm. If it's going to be windier, you want to be on Spyglass Hill. It's a little bit more inland. I think there's 6-7 holes that are Parkland style holes out there at Spyglass Hill. There are still like 10 holes that are exposed to the wind. So if there's going to be any sort of a slight weather edge, it's those 6-7 holes that you have protected on Spyglass, or it might play slightly easier if you have super windy conditions. So if you're going to try and run into any weather edge and really try and like go higher exposure on it, it would maybe be playing that, right? Trying to take the guys on Spyglass on the hardest day. But I'm going to have exposure to both sides. So I'm slightly favoring, right, that kind of strategy where I'm trying to protect the guys from the wind a little bit, but I'm still going to play it the other way. It's impossible to tell how this is going to happen. A delay could completely flip our strategy. And because of that, because of the type of chaos we've seen in this exact scenario before, I'm just going to lean into that, right? I'm going to lean into that chaos and kind of prepare for it. So got a game plan for it. We'll hop over to the DFS sheet where I can show you what I'm talking about. So I've added a new tab for my Patreons. It's called Type of Stacks. We've got a bunch of different tags I'm using for players and the different types of just like cores that I'm using. So the way that I'm building my lineups is everything is going to be by hand. So it's going to take me a lot longer, and I'm still building 150 lineups. So I'm going to be building tonight. When I wake up in the morning, I'll probably be finishing the last however many so lineups I have left. Hopefully not that many. Might even finish tonight if we stay up late enough. But the idea is going to be to try and take different cores of lineups. So to give you an idea, I'm not listing any of the course ones over here. All of those are implicit, right? You go over here to the starting course tab. There's going to be a lot of correlation I do with the people starting on one course versus the other. If you're looking at that windy, situation, you're trying to protect the guys from the wind. The guys starting on the Spyglass Hill might actually be worth a few looks, right? Because it is going to be a little bit windier tomorrow than what we're supposed to see out there for Friday. But don't play that like the gospel. So if you were doing that, you could start lineups with like a Victor Hovland. Your second man in might be like a Jordan Spieth, right? $9,400. Down here in the 8K range, you got a bunch of guys out there at Spyglass. Tommy Fleetwood, Jason Day, Hideki Matsuyama. But you don't have to make it just that simple. You can go back and say, you know what? I want guys that are starting on Spyglass that have excellent course history, right? Well, Victor Hovland, right, U.S. Amateur, also played pretty well there at the U.S. Open. I would say has really good course history. So I've gone down there as course history. You throw into Jordan Spieth, who's also a course history type of stack. Of course, it's censored, right? It's over there for my Patreons, but he's got the course history tag, and he also plays over there on Spyglass. Well, who else has that tag? Well, we go down here. Jason Day has some of the best course history in the world around the Pebble Beach golf links. Well, he's also playing Spyglass. So we could see a little core out there, and I guarantee you it'll be one of the cores that I'm playing for tonight. It's just a question of how many lineups, right? I'll play with this type of core. It'd be a Jason Day and, a Jordan Spieth and somebody like a Victor Hovland, right? And there's a bunch of different iterations of that. There are a bunch of other guys at Spyglass that also fit that course history tab. But there's a bunch of stuff I'm leaning into. One of the little tags I have is called darts, which is some of your elite tier iron players. And specifically with your wedges, right? The guys that go out there and hit it routinely to 4 or 5 feet. You've got guys like a Victor Hovland, Max Homa that certainly fit that description. Of your top end players, a lot of them have the darts tag. So I put them on every player, right, just for completion so that people would know who those players are. But like the only ones without it would be a Rory McIlroy, right? Because he's not very good with the wedge, right? That's kind of a well-known thing at this point. He's gotten a little bit better at it over the last year or so, but still definitely not one of his strong suits out there. But yeah, guys like Victor Hovland, if you're just looking for the darts tag, I mean, you can throw in a JT. We know he's, not a stranger to getting the ball close to the hole. Tony Finau, one of the best iron players in the world. Sun GM, you get it, right? There's a lot of them up there. So there's different skill sets you can lean into. I've got Mutter on there. So Mutter would be guys that in, wet, difficult conditions, whether it's windy, rainy out there, have a track record of getting it done and just kind of grinding it out, right? Taking the conditions and running with it. Well, Max Homa won the Wells Fargo Championship when it was an absolute monsoon out there. So he fits that type of box. Sun JM wins in difficult conditions. He plays well at the Honda Classic, right? I would consider him a mutter. Jordan Spieth, obviously a mutter. He's one of the best around the green players in the world. Justin Thomas, right, won a PGA Championship in pretty nasty conditions. There are guys that are just known for that. That is another skill set that you could lean into. You got POA putting, right? Max Homa, a great POA putter. You have guys up here like a Cantlay that's great on POA. You have a few other specialists in this range that you could also lean into, right? It's a little bit of a putting substack. That's how I'm handling this kind of week. So my player pool, again, much larger than it normally would be. But when I'm getting exposure to all of these players, it's in very intentional ways, right? I'm being very purposeful about the types of combinations that I'm getting to, where if one narrative ends up being the, driving narrative at the end of the week. And I think the fact that it's a no-cut event helps that, right? Everyone's going to get 4 rounds. So we're going to get to see the golf course truly play out over 4 days. I think you're going to see one of these type of things carry it home, right? Course history. Maybe it's the guys with experience. Maybe it's the elite tier iron players. Both of the off the tee metrics, right? So driving accuracy, you don't see it on a lot of these players, but like Tom Kim, right, fits that driving accuracy type of mold. Just making sure that I'm using them in the right type of lineup. So in terms of my exposure, you can see just how many categories like a Max Homa fits. I've got him in over half my lineups. And it's not because, I want to get over 2x the field. And I've got him at 21.5% ownership here. It's more so because he fits a lot of the different categories that we're looking for. And it's not all of them, I believe. There's one, maybe two categories that he didn't check off, but still just he checks most of the boxes. So that's what we're going with. Let's catch up on chat. Let me drink some coffee here too. My bad. I'll catch up on chat. I got super distracted because we had to go through the spiel on the stacks. That's the main theme, I would say, for this kind of slate, and something that we had to prepare for. Barry says, let's go. What's going on? What's going on, boss, bro? Another week. Let's make some money. You said it best. Let's get after it. Hadwin, too. I could see Hadwin. Yeah, I mean, he plays the short golf course as well. He's got one this week. Mr. Big Game Hunter himself, look out. Okay, I got you. West Coast swing continues. Let's get after it. Absolutely. Is Cole going to be the guy that everyone thinks is chalk that no one plays, so he comes in under-owned? I kind of think so. Like on my preview on Tuesday, it came out this week, a little bit later. Again, there was just so much weather-wise I had to account for that I went like 5 different directions before I settled on my plays. But yeah, is Cole going to be maybe a little bit lower owned than what he should be? I think so. I thought it was going to be 20, 25%. I was going to eat that chalk, just, move on to a different spot to differentiate. And he's what? I've got him at like 15%. Let me double check on that. We've got all the ownership on here, as we typically do for these live streams. But yeah, I've got him at 14.6%, just far from super chalky. So I think so. My algorithm definitely, has him at lower ownership than what I was expecting. I thought it was going to be closer to that 20% mark. And at 14.6%, I'd argue he's a little bit of a steal. You've only used Hadman, Rose, and Day in one and done. You're thinking Homa, or should you save him for Riviera? If not Max, who would you use? I really like Max this week. He's going to be extremely popular, though, out there in one and done. So him and Jordan Spieth, I think, are great options on a week like this. I think you could use either and feel really good about it. But you're also going to be with 10, maybe even like 12, 15% of the field out there in your one and done. It'll vary based on the size. It'll vary based on how sharp your competition is out there in the one and done you're playing. The sneaky option, and the one I don't really like, I don't love him this week. I am playing him, though, and be Colin Morikawa. You get to Colin Morikawa at relatively low ownership. I think Justin Thomas, it'll also be relatively low owned out there in a one and done format. And if you went down to any of these 8K range players, they'd be essentially unowned. So I kind of like the game theory approach just because of how much of an unknown we have with this golf course, with the rain, with the wind, with the potential for a Monday finish. All of that has me just like thinking like we're going to see some crazy shit. Like we're not going to have one of these top end guys winning. And I bet a Victor Hovland. So obviously I hope one of the top end guys could pull through, and specifically it be Victor on a week like this. But the later we get into the week, the more I'm thinking that we might get a Matt Fitzpatrick, right? Spike of victory, right? Somebody that can handle these windy conditions. I might take a shot this week. I know a lot of people in these elevated fields, right, will advocate for taking one of your top end players. This is one of the few times, and I wouldn't do it really unless we had these shitty conditions, that I might advocate for taking more of a game theory approach and like really trying to leverage the field. Like if you get the winner this week, you're one of the only people with that 3.6 million. That'd be real nice and one and done. What's good? What's going on, Cowboys Nation? Long time no see. T. Swendon says Whiskey Wednesday, one of those where you set the lineup and hope for the best weeks. Kinda, but you got to make sure you send your lineups properly, right? So you got to do all the head work now. Put in your stacks, put in your correlation, and then you set your lineups and just hope you get it right somewhere, right? If you play all the different angles, you hopefully get one of those angles correct. And if you've got 10, 15 lineups with that down, you might just think something. So yeah, it's a set your lineups and hope type of week. It's a lot of hope, unfortunately. Hand building 150 sets. Who wants it more than Luke? No one. It's definitely one of those nights where it's going to feel like that. Luckily, I'm going to be playing some video games on the side. So I'm going to have my other monitor with my optimizer up, just kind of like going through my different stuff. And then be playing some video games with my buddies. They got me on Power World right now, which is addicting as hell. So I'll be doing both. It won't be terrible. And the optimizer, I'm just going to be doing, essentially, I'm not going to be it's not 100% by hand. So I said hand building. It's going to be in sets of like 10. So I'm going to have the optimizer build me like sets of 10 lineups, but I've got to do like 15 of those sets. So I've got to go through, select a player pool for the different sets of lineups that I'm doing. And then I've got to make sure that each of those sets has the type of exposure I'm looking for, right? Because I don't want Max Homa in all of my course history stacks, right? Like I only want him in like half of them. So I'm going to have to, it's going to take me essentially 10 times as long to do it, but it's okay. It's what's necessary on a week like this. Day's recent play is awful. He had great course history last week's course and didn't do well. Yeah, I didn't play him last week, so I stayed away from that. It was not part of my exposure. You had him in everything. Yeah, I could see why you would have hesitation getting to him here, but hey, people snap out of it at some point, and we've seen Jordan Spieth do that at this golf course specifically. We've seen a lot of other course history guys like Tom Hoagie kind of come out of ruts and win this golf tournament at crazy golf figures too. I think it was like 150 to 1. So there's a time and place for everything. And for me, at least for Jason Day, I could see it in some course history related exposure, right? If that course history, that experience actually ends up really important this week, right? Especially with those nasty conditions, then maybe it does matter for Jason Day, right? But like if you're not looking at a course history heavy type of lineup or build, he's useless, right? I mean, you don't want to play him with that recent form. It's like you said, it's dreadful form. It ain't good. So yeah, unless you're looking at that course history angle, you don't really want to get to him, right? And I definitely agree with that. What is the strategy for single entry? So for single entry, if you're only playing one lineup, commit to something, right? Go out there, find your weather edge that you want to lean into, and find your script, right? If you want to take bombers that are only playing on the guys starting on the Spyglass course, then do that. Find your narrative and go with it, James. That's what I would say. What do I think about the pairings? It seemed like they paired a lot of similar golfers. Yeah, they have Jordan and JT together. I like it. When you have a Pro-Am format, you want to make it fun, so they put together some fun pairings. I think it's some similar players. I think you have guys that would vibe well together, a lot of friends that were paired up, and should make for some good TV. If you've got Jordan and JT getting hot, right, we'll probably see them, hyping each other up, that sort of thing. I'm all for it. Any Thagala love, no reason, just love the guy. Yeah, I love the guy too. I think I have a soft spot for playing him. I bet him outright at 75 to 1. So that probably answers your question, right? I think he could win this. You like Homa too. Who would be a weaker head-to-head full tournament opponent? Morikawa or Cantlay? Morikawa, because of the rainy conditions. He's the opposite of a mutter. He's not somebody that usually plays well when it's nasty out, which is why I'm getting some exposure to Colin this week, but it's only in iron-heavy lineups, right, where it's all about throwing darts and whatnot. Those are the only lineups I really want to get to Colin Morikawa this week. So, yeah, I would take him. If you're trying to find somebody, for Max Homa to beat, probably Morikawa, because Homa gets it done in nasty conditions, whereas Morikawa is not known for that. Am I playing any season-long best ball on Underdog? I'm not. So it's something that I just haven't put the time into. I know there's people out there that are doing a lot more of that because they just came out with that this year, but not part of my process yet. It probably will be at some point, especially if people have a good first impression of it, right? Obviously, this is the first time it's being done at such a large scale, and hopefully people enjoy it. If they do, maybe I'll try it out for myself. Luke, what's going on? What's going on, Antonio? Welcome to the live stream. So let's talk through some of my top plays. So I'm still on Victor Hovland. I'm still on Max Homa. Hard Rock Bet did give us numbers on Tom Kim, but they were all industry worst numbers. So they went out there, they found the worst numbers on every single metric, whether it was for outrights, top 5, top 10, top 20 odds. They matched the worst number in the entire industry. So for outrights, I think it was like Bet365 at a 40 to 1 on Tom Kim, which no one's going to bet. And they matched that over there on Hard Rock Bet. So not getting to any betting exposure on Tom Kim as much as I wanted to because of the numbers they posted. I do have to say I DM'd their support page on Twitter /X. And I was like, hey, they don't have my, I called him my favorite golfer. He's not my favorite golfer, but I said that. My favorite golfer, Tom Kim, on the board. I want to bet him this week. Do you think you could maybe tell the trading team to put him on the board? And they did. They messaged the trading team. And when I woke up this morning, he was on the golf board. So that was pretty sweet. But they had him at all, again, those industry worst numbers. So it's like they don't want you to bet on Tom Kim, which tells me that maybe they're scared of him this week. I don't really understand it. The form's not great at all, but yeah, definitely still playing him in DFS. So unfortunately, no outright exposure there, but did bet Hovland, did bet Max Homa, do have a bet on Jordan Spieth outright. And the other long shot I took that I didn't talk about, my DFS preview, was Sahith Theegala at 75-1. So I've got 4 outrights. It's real top heavy. It's not a huge card in terms of ROI, right? If we hit one of these outrights, it's like a 5x return on average, right? Based on which one ends up winning. I'm okay with that. So it's a top end elevated field, right? You only got 80 players to choose from. You're not going to be going after nearly as high an ROI number as you would be for, let's say, like a full field event. So it's kind of to be expected. So that's what I've gone with. Bunch of top 5, top 10s, top 20s that I posted over there on Twitter. So check that out for my entire betting card. So there's like JT I took for a top 5. A lot of my value plays I took for like top 10s are top 20 bets. Like Eric Cole was a top 20 at like plus 170. Check out all of that on Twitter so you can get the full lookout on that. In terms of DFS up top, guys, I think you might want to keep an eye out for Scotty Scheffler in nasty conditions. When you have wet dartboard for greens, he's been a plus player in the past. So just looking at some of his top end finishes, especially when he's had some of the better iron performances of his career, they would have been on real receptive greens. So depending on what golf database you have access to, you can access some of that information. If you sort it by mutters, essentially the guys that have played the best when we have the conditions that we're going to get this week, Scotty Scheffler's top 5 in almost every single category. So we know how good of an iron player he is. If you're playing approach heavy lineups, love a Scotty Scheffler at this golf tournament. JT already mentioned I like him in approach heavy lineups, but also potentially a look from the mutter angle. So I know I mentioned him, Jordan Spieth, Max Homa as mutters, but a ton of them down here in the 8K range. So just give you an idea, Tommy Fleetwood, Sungjae, Jason Day, Hideki, and Matt Fitzpatrick. All of these guys, and it's also Tommy Fleetwood here, are all players I would say are good in these windy, nasty conditions. So if you wanted to start with like 1 or 2 of these guys, right down here towards the bottom of the 9Ks, and then try and fit in maybe even like 2 more of the guys down here in the 8K range, you can make a lineup like that work. So when you're trying to build that kind of skill set, there's a real balanced lineups that I think intrigue me on this sort of slate. And I don't think a lot of people are going to build that way, right? I don't think a lot of the people are going to avoid this 10K range. I don't think a lot of people are going to avoid this top end of the 8K range in all of their lineups, which I find a little bit intriguing. I find Sam Burns' ownership inefficient on this kind of slate too. I've got him at 9.1% projected ownership, and he's coming in off a T6 finish, right? Was up there in the last group at the Amex. Did not come through for the win, but typically when Sam Burns plays well, he continues it and keeps it rolling. So for me, at a golf course where we don't really know how it's going to play, right? He fits the bomber narrative. He's also an extremely skilled POA putter. There are a few narratives, a few different, skill set stacks that we could use the Sam Burns in. So at $8,900, again, the lowest owned player in this range, doesn't make sense to me with the kind of form that he's in. So a player that I usually like to ride when he gets hot. I'm kind of regretting that I didn't bet him outright. I'll say that much. Like I'll say even that much about it because he's an absolute stud. I can see him going out there and winning. Down here in the bottom end of the 8s, again, a lot of the mutters down here. A player that kind of stands out to me would be Tommy Fleetwood. He seemingly fits the windy narrative, right? Relatively low ball flight, has a lot of experience on the DP World Tour, playing in these type of conditions. And I think a lot of the Europeans, it's not like they're going to have a massive advantage, but they've seen this misty, this wind, heavy type of air, type of environment quite often over there on the DP World Tour. A lot of your guys from the UK can speak to that as well. So like a Matt Fitzpatrick, Tommy Fleetwood in particular, I think have seen this even more than some of the other counterparts. So if you're going to lean into that kind of mutter skill set, I think that the Europeans and specifically the guys from the UK, especially are worth a few looks, at least in those type of builds. So I like Matt Fitzpatrick. I think Tommy Fleetwood fits a lot of the builds I'm looking for. And with Tommy Fleetwood, you also got the darts narrative too, right? Guy is an absolute flusher of the golf ball. Down here in the 7K, I'm not as heavy on this top end of the 7K players. So like a JT Poston's getting some ownership. Russell Henley, Bill Hostler getting some ownership themselves. I'm mixing in a few of them into a few of my skill set stacks. But they're not guys I really want to get well over the field on, right? If anything, I'm going to match the field on a lot of these sort of players because I just don't think they're worth the price tag. You've got Benny Ann, right? $8,000. And then you've got like legit AK players here, right? Like a Tom Kim, Hideki Matsuyama, Jason Day, Sanjay. Liv taking away a lot of the top end and middle end talent from a lot of these fields is really showing itself, right? Like normally JT posted, even in this type of form, would probably be like $7,200 at most. And now he's $7,900. Like Benny Ann should not be $8,000. Like I know he's been playing well. Don't get me wrong. No disrespect to my boy. He's also one of the best followers on Twitter, but $8,000, like he's arguably at least $800 too expensive. So this top end of the 7K range, there's a few that fit it. Like Sahith Theegala probably should be in this type of price bracket. Corey Connor, $7,700. Like I feel like that's a fair price tag. Brian Harman, $7,600. Like I feel like that's a decent price on somebody like Brian Harman. But there are guys up here that I just find imposters, and especially some of them at high ownership levels. So this is the fade range for me. This is where a lot of my ownership pivots are coming in. Up top, I'm taking a lot of the chalk. I'm spreading out my ownership quite a bit, especially with these top-end players. In fact, of the guys that are $10,000 plus, I'm playing every single one of them. So there's not really a good way for me to get a lot of leverage to the field. If there's anyone that I'm gonna have some leverage to, it's probably Victor Hovland, because I'll try and play at least like 30% in my lineups, which won't be a whole 2x leverage right out there at 18.7%. But I'm going to have all four of them in different type of skill set stacks. So it's not a range I'm looking to leverage the field on. You can say the same thing about a lot of this 9K range. I'm playing a lot of them in my lineups. So once again, it's not going to be a range I'm really going to get over the field on that many players, where I'm doing a lot of the game theory aspect, right? Where I'm trying to at least get some leverage this week, because no matter how much I correlate stuff, right? I still got to have players that I'm boxing myself away from. I'm letting the field crash and burn with. It's going to be this top end of the 7K range, fading the Benny Anns, the Postins, a few other guys down here in the mid 7K range that I just don't find worth the price of admission. But whether it's the price tag, whether it's the ownership angle too, in my opinion, you're just dealing with a little bit too much steam. So we'll go through some of our fades, our plays. We'll talk about a few of those too, mostly through the questions, but the fades I want to be intentional about. We're going to go through a few guys that I'm avoiding, which doesn't mean you have to avoid them, but I more so want to go through why I'm avoiding players, and maybe you can use the process, right, with what you're doing. Any Mav love. So I haven't gone to the bottom end of the 6K yet, which we'll talk about right now. I actually like a lot of guys down here, and Maverick, I like in course history scripts. So if you're looking for guys that like have experience at Pebble Beach, a lot of them have tournament history here. Maverick certainly has that too, but he has life experience at Pebble. His family had a home over there at Pebble. I don't think it was like their main home at any point of his life, but he went there quite often on golf trips, would play the golf course clearly, right, over there in his backyard. I believe it was hole number 14 where his family had the house. But yeah, he fits the course history angle quite well. So yeah, I think in certain type of builds you can get there. I mean, he's $6,200. And the added benefit of taking somebody in the 6K range, or maybe even two players down there in the 6K range, is you can take a double spend up. So if you wanted to go like Victor Hovland and a Scotty Scheffler together, you wanted to take that darts together, right? Two players that are really good on approach. I mean, they're expensive. It's hard to get those two spend ups, but you can make it work with somebody like a Maverick McNeely. So yeah, there's a few guys down here I like. I got Maverick, and I'll give you guys Sam Ryder, decent course history, fits a lot of the different approach buckets that we're looking for. Really good with the wedges, decent off the tee. I mean, just a much better player now than he was a few years ago, and has had a few spike performances on POA. So yeah, a few guys down there. Like we'll talk about a few more here in just a few minutes. Let's see. Let's catch up on chat. Who would you take between JT and Spieth for a round 1 and 2 3 ball? Oh, it's like choosing between my two favorite children. That's a tough one. But if I had to choose, you said you're leaning JT. I would lean Jordan Spieth, and I guess we're gonna have the Jordan Spieth talk. So everyone knows I'm playing Jordan Spieth. I do every single time play. I bet him every time he plays. It's just always worth the entertainment, betting on him and just enjoying the roller coaster of emotions that follows. But this golf tournament is the best setup we've had for him for a long time. And a lot of times we get a good setup for Jordan Spieth, and I jump ship. And a lot of times when I fade him, it goes well. Like he usually doesn't play well. I have a really good feel for when he plays well. I have the exact opposite feeling. I have a feeling like he's probably going to win this golf tournament. And I'm not like locking him in DFS. I'm playing him in like 35% of my lineups. I did bet him outright, so I got my exposure there. I really think that this sets up well for Jordan Spieth. It's not just the fact that he has good course history. He fits the golf course really well. It's mostly that he's playing the best golf I've ever seen. Not since like the historic season that he had 6-7 years ago. The best golf we've seen over the last 2 years, though. His ball striking is on point. His driving is the best that we've ever seen, actually, even compared to his historic season. The main difference, though, is that everything looks good. The approach, the around the green is always world class. He's actually gaining with the flat stick. I don't know. Like, it could all turn around this week. This could be the week where he reverts back to the mean and everything. That would not surprise me. But what we've seen is unbelievable stuff. So you guys already know I'm a sucker for playing the guy I'm going to play him every time. I can't believe he doesn't have more steam. He's just, if you look at the stats, if you go to the PGA Tour website, you go to like birdie or better percentage, he's number one on the PGA Tour. Now, granted, he's played some easy golf tournaments, I believe the Century, right? And that's it. But he's number one in bogey avoidance. He's number one in birdie average. He's like number one in all the proximity buckets on approach. Granted, a lot of that is due to sample size, but like when he played, he was playing unbelievable. He was like number one in every category on tour. He just didn't win the golf tournament. Thoughts on Aberg? I think he fits every golf course. He's always worth a few looks. Relatively low owned too. I've got him at 13.1% ownership. I have to say, if you're playing a bomber narrative, he fits that. Other than that, though, it's hard to like put him in course history, right? He's obviously never played here. Darts, he's not really known for being a good approach player yet. Don't know if he's a mutter. POA stats, he only has like 10 measured rounds. So it's kind of hard to use him in stacks because we don't know who he is. But if you want to start like an Aberg lineup with like a Rory McIlroy or like an Aberg and like a Scotty Scheffler in one of your builds, I think that makes sense, right? Lean into the off the tee. Thoughts on Ben Griffin? I think it's a course that he can compete at because it's not an off the tee heavy golf course, but a little bit hesitant to say that he's a great play. How about the correlation slips? I'm hyped for it. By the way, guys, I meant to say that earlier. Completely skipped my mind because I was all about the stacks and correlation. When we get to props, we have normal golf slips back on Underdog. We can anti-correlate and get boosted payouts, and you can enter 2 overs on bogeys. You can enter 2 unders on birdies together. It's great. We're back to normal play on Underdog, which is going to be huge. If you went over Showdown Thoughts, you apologize, but curious if there's a benefit this week or certain guys that I like. It's impossible to say for sure, but I think Pebble Beach every single day is going to be the easier course. So you should probably play the Pebble Beach guys. But I do think that there's something to be said for hiding from the wind on Spyglass, but I don't think it makes it an easier golf course than Pebble. So there's an advantage, right? If you play the guys on Spyglass on the windier day, right? For a 2-round event, right? It would have a little bit of an advantage that way, but not for each round, right? If you're playing Showdown, you're just working on 1-round sample, you always want the guys on Pebble, right? It's just that on the other day, you want the guys protected on Spyglass, right? Where it's going to play maybe a little bit easier than it will the other day. So that's what I'll say on that. Because like Pebble, when it gets really windy, can get a little bit tougher, but it's not going to get tougher than Spyglass, right? It's just going to maybe get a little bit closer to Spyglass in terms of scoring average. You just want it on the easier day for the 2-round stuff. Thoughts on Cantlay? You're torn because his irons haven't been great, but he's good on POA. Not sure about the bad weather. What do I think in general? So I agree with you with the irons. I really don't like his ball striking. Over the last 7 measured rounds, he's been horrendous on 5 of them. So that is wildly concerning to me. I will say, though, on the rounds without shots gained metrics, he played extremely well. So it's kind of trying to balance those two, right? You've got the eye test that shows that he has actually been playing decent golf. And then you have all these shots gained rounds, right? The Amex threw it off because of all the rounds outside of the stadium course. Last week at the Farmers, right, threw it off too with the 2-course setup. I think he's going to come in lower owned. I'll say that much. I'm not taking the plunge on Cantlay. He's one of my few fades on this type of slate, but I don't feel great about it because he's a world-class player. You said it with the POA stuff, right? He's usually pretty comfortable out west, but there's a lot of concerns. And it's not just the ball striking stuff. It's the putter too. He's not been putting very well. One of my thoughts on Hogard, I think the kid's a stud. I do think that he's a tad bit popular, given his price tag on this sort of slate. I apologize, guys. Let me get some coffee in me. 1 second. Was fighting that cough for a hot minute there. With Hogard, though, I'm thinking it's not the best week for him. Like, this is a course where I think experience might matter, and you're getting him at an increased price tag, increased ownership after the really good week. So I think he might be a little bit of a week late, right, playing a Nikolai Hogard here, but I don't think he's a horrible play. If you just really think the talent level's there, then lean into it. Prop time, not quite yet, man. And we'll do it when we get around to it, probably like 10 minutes. Jason, is Schauffele going to go out there and win this? You're pretty sold on that narrative. What's the narrative? Where's Jason? I don't think it's this one because he didn't really talk about narrative, right? Thoughts on Ben Griffin and Svensson? I think that they're decent plays, right? You already mentioned Ben Griffin before, right? I think he's an okay play. Svensson, I really like this week. Hey, why did I have a dream where Russell Henley was in your bathroom? I can't answer that for you. I don't really think about PGA Tour golfers in my sleep, which is kind of surprising given how much thought I put into PGA DFS. But yeah, I can't answer that for you. That's an interesting one. Seeing Russell Henley of all people in your bathroom, that's out there. We'll say that much. So over here in the 7K range, you guys can continue to throw any questions you have down in chat. By the way, let me know what narrative you're referring to, Andrew, because I'm not, maybe it's the POA putting you're talking about. Yeah, POA putting matters this week. I could see it. Over here in the 7K range, though, a lot of course history guys I'm going for. Just a lot of course fit players I'm looking for. So like a Denny McCarthy, really good course fit player, good course history player, and somebody like a Justin Rose. You've got guys down here like Adam Hadman, I think, that are pretty decent course fits. You could take a look at him. Kevin Yu played extremely well here last year, is on a heater himself. I'm surprised he's only at 6.8%. Somebody like Nick Taylor's won this event before. Again, they're getting a little bit of steam, right? 7.6% isn't completely unowned by any means, but he's not one of the super chalky players in this range. So Eric Cole is that super chalky player at 14.6%, but I'd argue that 15% ownership is far too low on somebody like Eric Cole, right? He's at least I'd say $700, $800 too cheap. And if you were to, swap places with an Eric Cole and swapped him with, let's say, like a JT Poston or even like a Benny Ann here at $8,000, I don't think anyone would protest that, right? He's probably the player that should be up here at the top end of the 7K range. Whereas you have guys that I think that are, still decent plays, right? They'd be one of the better plays down here in the bottom end of the sevens, right? If they were swapped down into this range, but there would be a much more appropriate set of price tags. So still like Eric Cole there. He is getting a little bit of attention though, which is annoying, but something we'll deal with in terms of differentiating our lineups. I know we had a question off the bat. I didn't mean to ignore your question. I meant to go back to it. So we'll go back to you, James. I remembered your question now is how many chalky players are too many in your lineup? And are two low-owned pivots enough? I would say 2 or 3 pieces of chalk. So if you're taking like somebody that's 20% owned in the 10K range, totally fine, right? Up top, you're going to have to eat some ownership. You'd say that's one piece of chalk there. Maybe you take a piece of 9K chalk too, and then you throw an Eric Cole down there in the 7K range. You probably want to stop there, right? Your last 3 spots, you want them to at least be maybe like average ownership or less. And if you're throwing in 2 low-owned pivots, you might be able to get away with a 4th piece of chalk, but probably only in like single entry contests. So I'm glad I remembered your question there, James. To answer your question, though, it's probably 2 to 3 pieces of chalk. 3 if you're pushing it, 4 if you absolutely have to for a single entry, but I wouldn't go too crazy on that. Is Schauffele just going to go out and win this thing? I mean, he's playing well, but I don't think he's playing that outrageously well where we have to be worried about him just like walking over the field, right? We get asked that same question of a Rory. Obviously coming in off a win over there on the DP World Tour. You can say the same thing about Scotty, world number 1, right? Is he just going to walk over the field? That's certainly possible, but I think there's a lot of guys you could say that about. In fact, if you're just looking at the shots gained stuff, right, particularly if like the last 2-3 events, you can say that about Jordan Spieth, right? Is he just going to come into the house that Spieth built, right, Pebble Beach, and run away with the field? So I can see it. I like Xander. In fact, he's one of the 10K guys I'm playing, right? I'm playing the whole 10K range, so no shit I'm playing Xander Schauffele, right? So I don't even know why I pointed that out, but yeah, I think he's got it in him, but a lot of guys do this week. You glitched didn't hear you. All good. All good. Yeah, I thought it was funny. If you had $1 million and had to put it on one golfer to win, who would I put it on? I would put it into stocks. Thoughts on Wyndham Clark versus a Day matchup? I would go versus Jason Day just because both golfers are in a really shitty run of form. And the only separator there for me would be the course history for Jason Day, right? I mean, he's got, I think it's over 2.4 shots gained per round out there at Pebble Beach Golf Links, which is by far the best in the field of anyone with a legit sample size, is in fact even better than Jordan Spieth, who like everyone thinks has the best course history at Pebble Beach. That honor actually goes to Jason Day. So if I was taking a shot on, again, Wyndham Clark, and I think this is a great matchup because they took two guys that are in dreadful form, some of the worst form of the entire field. I'd go with the guy that has the better track record. So Wyndham Clark's course, recent form is actually not that bad compared to a Jason Day, but yeah, I would still take J Day in that type of scenario. Any love for Harman? Good course fit. Not sure about his history or putting on POA. Yeah, hasn't played much here. So the reason why you don't know his course history is we haven't seen him much. Two made cuts, nothing special though. Over there 2 and 3 years ago. I think he's a good course fit, so I agree with that. I'm playing him this week just because of the course fit angle. He's got the driving accuracy, right? So if you're trying to correlate your lineup, maybe you take him with some driving accuracy players. And I'd say he's a dart thrower, right? From 125 yards and in, which is where you're going to have a lot of your par 5 scoring this week. He's a very accurate player. So one of the best players on tour, in fact, there from like 10 to 15 feet. Thoughts on Justin Thomas? Decent play. I talked him up a little bit on my DFS preview, but he's just back, right? He's playing much better golf. He's back to throwing irons, throwing darts out there. And in approach-heavy builds, I think fits a lot of narratives this week. Sean says, what's up? What's a good product ownership number? And how much does it vary by contest? Varies quite a bit, and it depends on the contest you're entering. So if I was going to give you a barometer, I'd say in like a large field single entry. So like maybe you're entering like a 500 to 1,000 entry single entry type of contest where you're entering one lineup, probably like 5% at the very most. That would be like taking a lot of chalk. That would be eating a lot of chalk, but mostly like sub like 1 to 3% out there for like normal size single entries. So if you're playing like a 2,000-3,000, maybe even like a 5,000 entry single entry, that's when I'm lowering it down to like 1%. Like that would be a lot, right? And I'm talking about chance to duplicate. So by 1%, I mean 0.001, right? In terms of what you're trying to calculate. Yeah, low. I want theoretical duplicates less than 1 in most contests. So the way that I calculate it, Sean, is I set theoretical duplicates, and I can set it to any number. I can set it to 0.1. I can make sure that there's essentially 0 chance of me having a duplicate. Normally it's around 1 though, especially for like single entries. Who am I not playing? 1 or 2 guys I am really fading. So guys I'm not playing, it's mostly the guys here in the 7K range. Like I'm playing a lot of the top end players, spreading out my exposure. It's just how I'm playing this type of slate. Talked about all that before. But if you're talking about fades, like guys I'm not playing, it's I guess Benny Ann like kind of sticks out. Like I'm not playing him. Not really a course that I think fits his game all that well. Down here in the 7K range, it's a lot of chalk. So to give you an idea here, like Chris Kirk at 10% ownership, like he's horrible putting on POA, so I don't love that for Chris Kirk. And on top of that, he's 10% owned. Like he's getting some attention. Did not play well the last time out. Yeah, we'll go with those two. So I don't know, not a lot of fades, man. It's just a different week for me. Like normally, dude, I'm all about game theory. I'm about fading guys, but not on a week where I'm just doing skill set stacks. Like I have to spread it out a little bit. You think Fleetwood can finally get a win? I almost bet him outright, so I was thinking about it, Mio. I'll tell you that much at least. I was almost going to that kind of bet. I didn't get there, so I'd venture to say no. And maybe by me saying that, I'll reverse jinx him into winning. I'm hoping he gets one. He more than deserves it at this point. Okay, he's knocked on the door enough, right? You're fading Cantlay, Homa, and Morikawa. I don't like the Homa fade. He's my favorite play this week, so don't love that. Colin Morikawa, I can get behind. He doesn't love these sort of conditions, unlike Max Homa, right? That has shown that he's okay in nasty conditions. The Cantlay fade I'm also okay with. So I'm okay with 2 of those. And we're not going to agree on everything. So by all means, right, like don't change your mind on Homa. But I think that one's a little bit scary to me. The Cantlay and the Morikawa ones I agree with. Morikawa playing decent, but not really known for these conditions. And Cantlay not playing well, right? So it's more the form for me and somebody like Cantlay. Let's see. I'll give you guys one more fade. I kind of bitched out on like a 7K fade. Like no one cares about that range, right? Like I'll give you guys like an actual fade up here in the 8K range. We'll sack up and give you something. 1 second. I'm not playing an Aberg. So I kind of want to because of the fact that he's a bomber. Actually, let me double check that. Let me proof check myself before I say something that's not true. Yeah, we're not playing Aberg. No Ludwig this week. He's one of the stands I'm taking against here in the 9K range. It's a lack of experience I don't like, and the fact that there's so many other bombers here in the 8K range that I don't need to throw an extra bomber into my player pool. So it's part of it's just because I didn't need another bomber, right? I already had like Sam Burns. You guys know I like Sam Burns this week. So yeah, I'm playing him as a bomber, right? Tony Finau, you could say the same thing about. But down here to the bottom end, right? Like Matt Fitzpatrick hits the ball quite a long way. I didn't need a bunch of extra bomber players. So Aberg, agree with you on Cantlay. I'm not playing him. I am playing Colin, but I can totally understand fading him. I get it. Yeah, the Max Homa one, it feels a little risky, but hey, you got to be risky, right? So you're late. Thoughts on Ben An? I think a little overrated and a little overpriced. So if you could tell, I'm not as bullish on him there. Yeah, it's not so much that he's a no-go. It's that like I'm not as sold on him as everyone else is seemingly sold. No need to stream this, but send a Patreon message for a Discord invite. Yeah, I got you. And yeah, I didn't see the no need to stream this until I already read it. My bad. And I got you, Chris. I'll send you an invite after we get off stream. It's it'll be super. I'll have to set your role after you join, but then you'll see all the channels on there and you'll have access. Let's see. Let's go through the 6K range. Already went through the 7s. I think a lot of game theory pivots that you can make down here in the 7K range. A few guys that kind of stand out here. We're going to do this real quickly and then hop into props. Wyndham Clark stands out to me as a little bit of a game theory pivot. Nick Taylor, I already mentioned him as a little bit of a pivot. Not really low owned, but I like the course history. I also like the fact that he's playing decently. Number 27 in terms of recent form ranking. Brendan Todd, you guys know I love him, right? Talked him up as a value play. But Eric Van Rooyen at $7,000 flat fits a lot of the different advanced metrics we're looking at. So if you saw my course breakdown, you guys probably know what I'm talking about with Eric Van Rooyen. He's a good POA putter, and on a lot of the iron ranges that I was honing in on. So it was like 100 to 130 yards. He was one of the top 5 players on tour, and he was really good from 175 to 200 yards, which is where you have your longer par 4s and your par 3s out there at this golf course. So EVR, I think, a sneaky good course fit. And he's going to have to keep the driver in play. I think that's really all I'm worried about with Eric Van Rooyen. But the approach profile looks really good for him. So I like him at 1.9%. Down here in the 6Ks, we have some surprising chalk numbers. So a lot of it's because we only have 80 players. So obviously the ownership is going to be a little bit more condensed than you would have for most slates. But we got like a Cam Davis at 7%. We've got somebody like Lewis Glover at like 5% ownership. Mav McNeely at 4.6%. But nothing's too out of hand. So you've got a little bit of stuff that you might have to navigate. It's not like you can just take anyone in the 6K range and get that sub 1% ownership like you get for a lot of these main slates, but still some ownership leverage you can get down here. Like Sam Ryder, for example, I like is only about 3% owned. To give you a few other pivots that I'm taking, one of my favorites is Lucas Glover at 5%. So he's not somebody you're going to take and get real different to the field with, but he is somebody that fits the golf course quite well, gives you some of that salary savings that you need to maybe take for a multiple spend up lineup. And I mean, he's still sub 5% owned, right? So it's not that sub 1% that we get for a lot of these main slates, but some ownership savings that you can get down here. And obviously a little bit of differentiation, right? With somebody that's going to be sub 10% owned. A few other favorites, I like Tom Hoagie, right? Talked him up a little bit earlier, but let's find another mid 6K player. Luke List. Right? If we're going to see dartboards out there, if it's going to be all about, throwing darts onto these just soapy, lift, clean in place sort of conditions, maybe he's worth a few looks. So a lot of 6K players that I think are viable, right? Guys like Luke List, Lucas Glover, I think are mispriced in terms of their price tag. You can say the same thing about Sam Ryder at $6,000, right? He's probably like a top end of the 6K range sort of guy, down there at the dead minimum for a price tag. So the Draftkings interns, I didn't really think they did the best job out there with their pricing on this kind of week. And some spots you could take advantage of, right? Like Eric Cole at $7,300. We're not going to call him a free square, right? Because, I mean, he's still got to get to the optimal lineup to really mean anything. But at that kind of price tag, you're saving a whole $1,000 right there, right? Like you can take him, feel pretty confident in that spot, and then spend up from an 8K to a 9K player. So it has a lot of utility. And, even the guys down here in the 6K range, like a lot of the guys we pointed out, like a McNeely, for example, Lucas Glover, they're getting some ownership, but I understand why. Like they're mispriced, right? And I think because they're not getting out of hand with the ownership, you can still take them for a little bit of that game theory angle. It's been some money. You said it best. Let's get after it. What about Hostler? Good course fit. Good on POA. I like him for those type of lineups. Seabez is a good course fit. I think he's an okay course fit. You take him at courses where off the tee is de-emphasized. That's kind of what we're getting with Pebble Beach. You could see it, yeah. I think he's an okay course fit. I wouldn't say that he's like an elite level course fit because the iron play, particularly with the wedges, isn't top tier in all those proximity buckets, but it's good enough. So yeah, I'd say he's a decent play. Let's talk some props. So we're already running into about an hour. I knew we'd take a little bit longer today with all the different stack talk that we wanted to go through. But now to talk some props, which I'm excited to get into because we finally have a full board on Underdog. So if you haven't seen it yet, you haven't gone the news, which you're crazy if you haven't seen it yet. We've got 5 categories on Underdog and no restrictions on the types of slips that we can enter. So we can go out there, take 2 overs on birdies together if we wanted to. We can take 2 unders on birdies together, and it'll adjust the payout. So you can see 2 unders on birdies, right, would be 2.79x. 2 overs on birdies is, I believe, the same, right? Yeah, 2.79x. But if you went out here, for example, and took like an over on birdies and let's say like an over on strokes, so you anti-correlated a little bit, you get a 3.21x payout. So there is a lot of possibilities with this. I mean, first off, the best part is that there's not nearly as many hoops that we have to go through when building lineups and slips over here in Underdog. But furthermore, there's anti-correlation that we can do to get higher payouts than we would before. And a lot of times we were just entering those kind of slips anyways, right? For like 3x payouts. I would think a lot of times for Sunday slates, like we'll have guys that we expect to choke right out there on Sunday, and then chasers that we're taking for like overs on birdies, right? So for example, a lot of times we'll do like overs on strokes for an inexperienced leader, and then overs on birdies for maybe a stud that we're expecting to move up the board. That kind of slip, rather than paying 3x, is now going to be like 3.21x, right? And if we try and anti-correlate it even more, we can get some 4-leg cards that pay like 12x as opposed to the 10x that we could before. So it's really, I think, better payout structure than what we had before. Page unresponsive. Oh boy, we good? Let's see. Are we good on that end? Yeah, it looks like we're okay on my streaming end. Okay, sorry about that if it froze up on you guys. But there's a lot of possibilities with the different type of structure that they went with. So I love that. Some of the plays I've took already have been bumped, but a few that we can go through here together and put together a little stream slip. So a prop that I took that hasn't been bumped is this over on Sahith Theegala birdies. And what we're going to take is an over on Sam Burns bogeys. So he's at 2.5 bogeys, unless that's moved. It has not. So it's still at the 2.5 bogey mark. Both of these players are over there on the Spyglass Hill course, which I'm going to bring up pgatour.com just so that we can double check that on some of these plays. I could bring up my spreadsheet, but just to not go from tab and application to application, just bring it up over here in the browser. So we need to find Sam Burns, make sure he's on Spyglass. So yeah, we got him over there in Spyglass. And I can tell you for a fact that Sahith Theegala is also on the Spyglass course. So you would think that this would maybe not be the best combination, right? Because we got an over on birdies and an over here on bogeys. But it's decent for Spyglass. Normally, we have a birdie average of just over 3 birdies per round, and normally a bogey average, bogey or worse average, of just over 3 per round as well around Spyglass. So for somebody like Sam Burns that's outside the top 100 in tour in terms of bogey avoidance, a player that can get a little bit sporadic off the tee, and over there at Spyglass, there is some nasty, gnarly natural grass that can get you a little bit off the tee. I'd expect him to go over 2.5 bogeys. So it's actually a prop I haven't entered yet myself. If you need to get something in right now, right, in case there's any bumps, this over on Sahith is something that you can pair it with, but I've already maxed out Sahith, so I can't enter this myself. So we might try and find something else here on stream to go out there and pair with the Sam Burns. But the wind looks like it's not completely non-existent, right? If we go over here to the HRRR tab, which actually just updated for us 26 minutes ago, you can see that they're calling for about 10 to 14 miles an hour of sustained wind and something in the 16 to 21 mile an hour range for wind gusts to start the day. So, on the harder of the two golf courses in Spyglass, you may see ball in hand, which will help these players. But Sam Burns is kind of prone to making bogeys, and all he has to do is play to the field average in terms of bogeys or worse. What we saw at Pebble Beach the last few years. And again, it's a weaker field, so we might see the field averages improve a little bit. But Sam Burns, shouldn't be projecting for lower than the field average with bogeys. He's kind of makes a lot of bogeys out there. It's just kind of what he's known for. So taking over for that, and then with Sahith Theegala, he's somebody I project for just under 4 birdies per round. So this one maybe not as high a hit rate as what we're going to have here with this bogey prop, but he's a great putter on POA. He's extremely aggressive, and with the wet conditions, I think you're going to see a lot of birdies. I think the scoring averages are going to improve over here at Spyglass and Pebble compared to last year because of all the wet, rainy conditions, because of how soft everything's going to be. I think you're going to see a fair amount of bogeys, but you're going to see a shit ton of birdies, right? I mean, it's dartboards out there. You can be aggressive to every single pin, and somebody like Sahith Theegala is not going to lay back, right? I mean, he's going to go out there, take aim at every single pin. So on greens that he should be comfortable on, right? Loves that POA surface. I'm taking an over on birdies for him. So it's an anti-correlated slip. I don't think it's as anti-correlated as what Underdog thinks, though. And I think that normally this should be like a 3x payout, but they're giving us a little bit of extra juice there because they're quote unquote anti-correlated. And if this was bogeys and we took an under on strokes right out here for Sahith Theegala, that would be much more anti-correlated than doing birdies and bogeys, right? I mean, there's courses where there's just a lot of birdies and bogeys made, not so many pars. That's what we have with Spyglass Hill, right? There's not a ton of pars that are made around that golf course, which is why I think that this is viable out here for round one. So I love the selection. Having all these different categories to choose from is going to be an absolute game changer out here for Underdog. And it's just like the good old days. Payouts, I mean, if you're going to just take all overs on bogeys, which, I mean, this used to be a strategy, right? We'd just go out here and just spam overs on bogeys, right? I'm just clicking random names here, by the way. This is not a slip that I'd enter, but we used to just be able to go out here and take all overs on bogeys and just hope the golf course played easier. You can still do that. You could enter this slip, it wouldn't stop you, right? But they're going to pay you a whole lot less. So I'm actually not going to finish my thought on that. I'm going to keep it to myself, but you can do that if you wanted to, right? They're not going to stop you from doing that, which is at least good to have in our back pocket if we really want to go out there and correlate things. See, any prop questions? How much emphasis were you putting on the short game this week? Not as much. They have really small greens, so you are going to see guys miss the green, but it's all rough around the green. So unless you're looking at courses with a bunch of rough around the green, it's kind of tough to get a comp for it. So I don't know. I think we're going to see a lot of darts, right? I'm not expecting as many greens to be missed this week as you would see for most. I think if they play on Sunday, you're going to see a lot missed, but I don't think they're going to play Sunday with the 60 mile an hour winds. Let's find a pairing out there for that Sam Burns prop. So I can get some exposure out here myself. I'm going to refresh the board, right? A lot of this looks to be getting bumped live, which is probably a response to the weather. Again, the conditions the last few hours have gone a little bit worse out there in the forecast. So if we're going to pair up this Sam Burns prop, I might do it with a fade of the Spyglass course, or maybe even out there for Pebble. We could find a little fade to take here for round one. Let's mull our options here because I'm not against taking a slightly lower paying card to kind of lean into that wind edge, but I'm also not against anti-correlating again and trying to find a way to boost up the payout. So let's look at that here in a second. We're going to circle back to that after we go through the prize picks board. Prize Picks board seems a little bit more accurate. So they've got the strokes about 0.5 higher for most of the players. Over there in Underdog, I think they're a little bit too aggressive with some of their projections. On Prize Picks, they seem to have this priced pretty well. If you're going to take anything, I'd say some of the unders on the 71 and a halves maybe aren't the worst idea. So like in particular, like Hideki Matsuyama, for example, at like 71 and a half strokes, I would certainly lead for his under on this type of slate. So I'm not getting a ton of exposure to Prize Picks. They've recently changed my limit there to $15 per slip, which I'm also not going to add to that thought, but it's not the end of the world out there with a $15 limit. Let's just say that much. But it's also not my favorite pricing. So I'm not getting a bunch of exposure there. It's nice to have different lines compared to Underdog, because if we end up getting conditions that are maybe a little bit easier than what we're expecting, then there's going to be some room for unders on some of these later tee times, right? So for example, we have a Ricky Fowler going off early at 11:57, but Wyndham Clark doesn't tee off to 1:21, right? So if we're watching ESPN Plus tomorrow, right, midday, lunchtime for a lot of us out there, and we see that conditions look maybe a little bit calmer than what the wind conditions were being called for, maybe we can take an under on the Wyndham Clark going off a little bit later. So I think I'm going to leave a lot of my prop exposure on Prize Picks to maybe some live betting if we end up getting that scenario. But over here in Underdog, I think there's quite a bit of value right now for fades, because they're, again, I think a little bit too optimistic with their projections. So just to give you like a comparison, right, they've got JT Poston at 70 and a half strokes. I think he's up at 71. Yeah, look, he's at 71 strokes over here in Prize Picks. I wasn't sure if they had him on the board. If not, they definitely would have had him at like 71 strokes. So it's about a 0.5 stroke difference for most players out there, which is why I mostly want to side towards fades. Now, Sahith Theegala is not posted for birdies over here on Prize Picks. There's a reason why I don't think he's posted, right? They've got guys like Benny Ann posted at 3.5 over here, Bo Hoster, Keegan Bradley. They're not elite level birdie makers, right? They've got Theegala matched up against Sam Burns, right? Who's an elite tier birdie maker, right? Who coincidentally, right, also isn't posted at 3.5 birdies. The reason why I took him over here on Underdog, right, for that first pairing we went with is, I mean, he's an elite tier birdie maker, right? You can see they have Sam Burns at 4 birdies. That 3.5 number was a mistake in my opinion. So I have him projected for just over 4 birdies per round. So that's why I took Sahith over there. But other than that, it's a lot of fade value. If you're going to take anything in terms of like unders, I took some unders on this par 5 strokes prop. So what I ended up doing, and these got bumped, so that's why I didn't mention them before. I had Tony Finau under 18 and a half cumulative par 5 strokes. That got bumped down to 18. And I had Sungjae Im also under 18 and a half. So he was up there at that mark. He was the number 5 par 5 player on tour last year in terms of par 5 scoring. Tony Finau was number 12 on the PGA Tour in terms of par 5 scoring. So for players that were elite level in that category, in a golf course that routinely plays to a 1.5 under par average in terms of the par 5s, you'd have to think that players that are in the top 12 of that category, right, are going to do better than that on average, right? And of course they are, right? That's how stats work, right? That's why we look at year-long averages for these type of projections. And that's why I took their under at 18. So those got bumped. Obviously, a little bit of value secured there, but potentially something we could do here. And this would give us an anti-correlated slip. And again, I don't think this is really anti-correlated, because in this case, we're going to take guys from multiple golf courses, is like an under on Tom Kim par 5 strokes. Now, the wind kind of scares me, right? It looks like it might be a little bit windy tomorrow. So this is the only thing really holding me back from wanting to enter this right now, or else I would probably enter this here on stream. But Tom Kim was number 14 on tour last year in par 5 scoring. So he was just behind the Tony Finau, right? So those got bumped down, right, to 18 before. So if we're going to follow that same kind of script, we could take a Tom Kim here, right, and take his under on par 5 strokes. It's different golf courses, right? Spyglass is a harder beast than what we have at Pebble. Even in the wind, right? It's going to play harder than what you have at Pebble. So you take the over on bogeys, and then you go to the par 5s, which are a completely different task. I mean, even in windy conditions, you still birdie par 5s. That really doesn't change unless you're playing directly into the wind. You got to like that for Tom Kim. So I'm considering that. That would pay 3.12x, which again is higher than our normal payout, which is why I like the changes so much. It's going to really help our ROI. It's going to give us a lot more choices out there with what we're doing. And I guess just to lock in these props, I'm going to... I'm going to hold off for now, but you can see how close I am to wanting to enter that. So we'll leave it there. In terms of a prize picks card, one prop I really like, and I'll try and find a pairing for you guys here, is this Justin Rose over Davis Riley. Rose and Riley both aren't playing the best golf. I'd say that Rose is playing a little bit better than Riley has over the last few months. What I like here, and it's kind of like that Jason Day versus the Wyndham Clark matchup that somebody mentioned before. You've got somebody with elite level course history, right? Past champion, last year champion, right? Out there with Justin Rose against somebody with dreadful course history, Davis Riley, who has missed the cut in 2 of his 3 trips to Pebble Beach. So kind of like me wanting to take Jason Day over that Clark there, I would definitely take the Justin Rose side. So they're both playing Spyglass, so there's no Spyglass versus Pebble nonsense going on. I'm out there with that matchup. So I matched him with 72.5 on Nick Dunlap. So I had his under at 72.5. That got bumped down to 72. So again, they're just prize picks is all over my D with these bumps, constantly just riding like my exposure. It's crazy what they do out there. Let's try and find a little pairing for you. So they didn't have Sahith up. If they had Sahith at 3.5, I would definitely want to fire on that. Let's find a little strokes here. And like I said, these guys towards the bottom end of the board, I don't think are the worst leans towards an under. And just for the sake of comparison here, I want to look at Draftkings. So just give me a moment while I bring up the Draftkings odds, because I want to line shop this Hideki Matsuyama prop. I feel like Hideki is going to be potentially at minus odds. They're at 71.5. And if so, that's all the confirmation bias I need to enter. So let's see what they've got Hideki at. I'm curious. The 71.5 and slightly juiced under. So if it was minus 130, I would probably be all over this. He's minus 125. So he's close, close to getting the plus 100 number out there for his over. I could be convinced into taking this. So I will do this for the stream slip here. I'm not sure if I'm going to add the exposure myself, just because I do prefer the Nick Dunlap under over there at 72 strokes. And he's also playing Pebble Beach, right? Nick Dunlap. So he's playing the course that I know is going to play easier than Spyglass. But Hideki Matsuyama, class player, right? Somebody who's at the top of his profession. This isn't a terrible play. So we'll make this the tentative if you only play prize picks sort of slip, the exposure that you can get there. But even like at 72, I would still lean under on Nick Dunlap. So I don't think it's the worst play, but I would probably prefer this Hideki play just a little bit more. And I'm still mulling on whether to enter this or not. Let's see. Any prop questions? Looks like we're good. Cool. Well, we went overtime. That's all right out here for round 1. We will be doing rounds 2 through 4 out here in terms of live streams. So make sure to tune in for those. Those will be before play for rounds on Friday through Saturday. So Friday morning, we'll be getting ready for round 2, Saturday morning, round 3, so on and so forth. So keep an eye out for my Twitter or over there on my Discord page for when we'll be going live for those. And looking forward to this event. It's an elevated field, no cut. So the weekend's going to have a little bit of a different vibe, right, compared to regular PGA Tour events. But that just means more options out there for Showdown, more of a game theory approach that we can take for some of those weekend contests, and one that I'm looking forward to take advantage of. So smash the like button on the way out of here. Best of luck out there with your exposure. And in terms of the outright card, just to remind you, outrights on the PGA side, we took Victor Hovland, Jordan Spieth, Max Homa, and Sahith Theegala. And then on live, which I didn't mention before, I did bet a few live outrights. It was Cam Smith, Brooks Koepka, and DJ. So really top heavy. Like I said, I'm going after some of that top end talent and hoping we see one of the big guys come through. But that's all I've got. Appreciate you guys out there. I'll see you guys for round 2 through 4 streams, and let's have a slate.